I am loath to stop the conversation because the whole reason we brought you here was to hear all the great things you have to say about Bill and all your memories. And I honestly could not be happier with how much I've already seen of people just sharing their experiences with people new, learning about the amazing things we knew about Bill, the amazing things we didn't know about Bill from other people. It's truly amazing to see like how broad this group is and how wide Bill's impact really was, because it's amazing, and we know that this group is only even a slice of who was impacted by Bill. So we're really honored to have you all here. I am not going to talk for a long time. We are going to have like a real short kind of, I hesitate to call it a ceremony. We have some people who would like to say some things about Bill. And I think we would all like to hear them. I should say who I am. I'm Josh. I'm Bill's oldest stepson, although I would call myself his son rather, because I do think he was that kind of person for me. And I think it's safe to say he was that kind of person for my brothers as well. He was a really special guy. So we're going to have a handful of people come up and talk, and then after that we will go back to chatting and making things and exploring the museum and celebrating the way Bill would like us to celebrate, which is with joy and with our hands full of weird things, because Bill always had his hands full of weird things. So I'm going to ask our first speaker to come up, and that's Tab, and she'll tell you a little bit about Bill from her perspective.
In 1962, that was many moons ago, we took a trip to the Reno Air Races, which is something that my dad loved to do every year. And so we'd take Granny and Bill and go on up to Reno. We had a 1957 Ford station wagon, and Mom and Dad rode in the front, Granny and me in the middle, and the Munchkin in the back with all his toys. Anyway, we stayed in Reno overnight, and we would continue our trip to eastern Nevada the next day. My mom loved to gamble, and she couldn't stand not touching the slot machines. So anyway, she went while we were packing up the car and gambled some. She had a lucky streak, and she came back with a cup of silver that was about this big. And there was silver dollars, halves, quarters, and dimes in there, and it was full. Anyway, we got all excited about that. Anyway, we were on our way, congratulated her on her luck, and we started out on Interstate 80 East. We traveled to Winnemucca, wonderful town, and Battle Mountain, and other nameless little ghost towns and nothing towns. Anyway, we reached Crescent Valley, which is where we were going to in the first place. It was long and miserable with no air conditioning. The scenery is desert. It's just desert, and that's just awful. Anyway, when we got there, my dad started unpacking the car, and he made a horrible discovery. The kid had gotten into the tub of silver and thrown it out all the way from Reno to near Elko, thrown all the silver out the back. We were horrified. We felt sick. But he didn't get spanked. We couldn't talk. The only thing I can say is if anybody is into metal detecting, they can just follow Interstate 80 from Reno to Elko and maybe make a few bucks. Another story I wanted to tell you about was I think that my dad passed on some magic to Bill because my dad grew up on a farm, and there was his grandpa and his mom, and the house was really old, and so he learned how to do everything that needed to be done that my granny and great grandpa couldn't take care of. So I remember we had a coal-burning furnace in the basement, and it would get clinkers. I'm not sure what clinkers are. Do you know what they are? Something to do with coal burning. Yeah. Anyway, he'd be down there cursing at the furnace, and he had to do all the maintenance on that old house, and it was tough. When my dad was growing up, he didn't have his dad around, but he had lots of family and lots of friends. He and my mother used to drive in the Destruction Derby down at the racetrack, and so they did that, and he hung out with a lot of railroad people, so he knew a lot of stuff when he was growing up and met a lot of people that taught him. He loved aircraft and trains and tinkered with models of particularly train models for years and years, and ended up with quite a large collection of them. Anyway, he graduated early from high school and attended Chicago Aeronautical Institute for a while. He got the westward ho feeling and drove from California to California from Illinois in 1938. It took him 2 weeks to get here, or to LA, in a Model A. He got a job at aircraft plant in Downey and stayed there for a while until he got homesick. And then he went back to Chicago again. So anyway, he got reconnected with my mother. Then he got his draft notice, and he was off. So his experience in the Air Force was what got him going in maintenance and aircraft. When my brother came along, my dad taught him how to fix things, and he learned very well. He had a knowledge of classic cars and took flight training and ground school and so forth and so on. He acted as our personal tow truck driver because myself and my sisters, we always had junky cars, and he would come and rescue us. He never said no, and he was cheap. He didn't charge us anything. So anyway, it brings me to the story about my sister's new car. She wanted to have a certain green color of a car. She had to have it, and they said, there's one of them in Southern California, and there's one in Louisville, Kentucky. And the one in Southern California got sold, so we had to fly to Kentucky to pick up her new car. And it was fun. There was 3 of us that went on the trip, and we picked it up and took our time getting back to Washington. That car is something else. It tells you when you need a rest and a cup of coffee. It tells you. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, we loved that car. Getting back to Washington, it was fun. So we make trips back and forth. We live in Sequim. We make trips back and forth here to see family members and so forth. One day, we were making a trip to come into Enumclaw, and we came on northbound I-5 as you're climbing out of Tacoma and going up the hill, and the traffic was heavy with lots of trucks. I was looking out the windshield, and there was this thing. It was like a UFO. But anyway, it was swirling around. It was a piece of cardboard or something like that. Anyway, it was large, and it was swirling around like it was caught in a dust devil or a mini tornado. Anyway, it circled around it. I kept watching it, and darned if it didn't come right into us. And it hit the grill on that pretty new green car and embedded itself in the grill. And then it went down onto the road and hit the undercarriage of the car and made a heck of a noise. But we just kept going. What are you going to do? You got trucks going past and whatever. Anyway, so we went on to where we were going to stop. And everything seemed to be fine, but there was a piece of that, whatever that was, fiberboard or whatever, embedded in the grill of the car, in the front grill. So we had to get going to get back to Sequim, and I had just canceled my AAA card. So we had to get going. Well, we came on Highway 18 and we got into Auburn, and all of a sudden this horrible, ungodly noise started underneath the car. It was scary. Anyway, we merged out of the fast lane and got over to the side of the road as fast as we could. And I told my sister, I canceled the AAA card. What are we going to do? And I said, we'll call Bill. We'll call Bill. He always comes. He never says no, never. We called Bill. He says, no problem. He was in the area anyway. He never says no. He says, sit tight, I'll be there. He showed up. He looked under the car and disappeared for a couple of minutes. And then he crawled out from the car, and he had this giant piece of dented butt plate that he ripped off the underside of the car in his hand. And he said, okay, we're all set. So we all left in a cloud of dust. We were rescued again by the tow truck genie, I called him. I don't know how he knew how to rescue people like that. It must have been the magic from my dad. We made it home just fine, but we had to wait for 6 months for them to find parts for that pretty green car because the car was too new. There was no parts. It was a freaky thing to get hit by a runaway flying board, which could have landed any place, but it chose my sister's new pretty green car. I have more, I could go on and on, but you'll all go to sleep.
So now you know if you're looking for more stories, she's sitting right over there, and I bet she's got some really good ones. Next we have Jen.
So for those of you that don't know, Bill was my uncle, and because he sort of came along rather late in the game for his parents, we were closer in age than he was to his siblings. So he was kind of like a big brother to all of us as we were growing up, and it always different from the beginning, always kind and giving and responsible, even beyond his years, even when he didn't even know that what he was doing was being responsible or learning how to fix things for us or whatever it was. He was always there for everything, and it's true that he never had enough time just simply because there wasn't enough time in the day for all the things that he wanted to do. So first, I wanted to thank you guys all for coming as we remember and celebrate his life. Because he was not just my uncle, but also a great friend and mentor and confidant. And we stand here not only to mourn his passing, but to honor the profound impact that he had on our lives, leaving an indelible mark on each of us in his own way. For myself, Bill was more than an uncle. He was always a beacon of wisdom and support, always ready to offer a helping hand or lend an ear. He believed in the power of knowledge and was dedicated to sharing his experiences and nurturing the talents and dreams of those around him, which he always did. He never told me that any of my ideas were stupid or that I was wrong. He always just tried to help me achieve whatever it was that I wanted to do, and if he could help, he would, and often did. He contributed to each of us in different ways, supporting our success and personal growth through his gentle encouragement and patient teachings, and he was that way from the beginning. Until now, I have not known a world without him. And while I'll miss him beyond any words that I can say, I cannot help but focus on my gratitude for having such a person in my life, because as most of you know, He was unique, and in many ways, part of that had to do with his silly side and the fact that he was willing to have a laugh and laugh at things that most people might kind of give a second look at. But he was goofy and funny all the time and always had a good attitude about everything that he did. Even when he didn't have a good attitude about it, he still did. And I'm fortunate to be so strongly influenced by someone who was so funny and intelligent and ever patient. It may not seem responsible, but when I was 15, because I had been riding on the back of his motorcycle and he had taught me how to ride when I was 5, and they made the mistake of teaching me how to drive a car by the time I was 10. So my nickname, Leadfoot, became something that he had to deal with a lot when my parents made the mistake of getting me a '72 Camaro for my first car. And I had that for, I think it was a total of 6 weeks before the first accident, and it went on from there, and it was constantly me calling him and saying, I think the carburetor's stuck, and he would tell me, well, what sound is it making? And I would have to describe it over the phone. And keep in mind, there's no cell phones. So this is me trying to reach him at the airport or at home or whatever. And he would always come, and he would always fix whatever it was. And everything that he did when he fixed it was right. And you never had to worry about whether or not it was going to be quality work, because he never did anything halfway. However, there were countless occasions when I was young and he was still learning, where that turned into hilarious and memorable adventures, like when we were driving down Glen Oaks Boulevard in his Volkswagen Bug and the wheels came off. Or when we went to the top of Gramis Hill on the Flexi and I was riding behind him and it malfunctioned somewhere down this steep hill and we took a right and went directly into a cactus bush and spent the rest of the day pulling out needles. But he would take me every year. The AMA would have motorcycle rides up Angeles Crest, and we would go camping in Yosemite, and he took all of us, all of the kids. He would take us and go hiking with us and whatever. And as I got older, I didn't yet have my driver's license. So I was 15, he was 25, and he was working for Merle Norman, and he had just bought a brand new BMW red 325. And he called me up and said, let's go to Yosemite. I said, great, it was normal, whatever. He said, we'll take the new car. I said, okay. So we got to the valley and he said that he wanted to go climb Half Dome, which was beyond my skill level. He said, here's the keys. And I just assumed he meant watch the car. But he said, wait, I want to show you something. So we get in the car and he starts driving around Yosemite Valley, which is just a circle. And you can just keep going and the speed limit's no higher than like 35. And he gets out of the car and he says, I'll be back by 4:30. And what am I supposed to do? He said, don't burn out my clutch. And threw the keys to me. And keep in mind, I was 15 with no driver's license. And I took that car all around Yosemite Valley in circles for hour upon hour and I did not burn out his clutch because he knew and he trusted me and he had taught me well. Well, by the time he told me to meet him at 4:30 at the bottom of where the hike is supposed to end, he doesn't show up. The weather gets bad. All of a sudden, it's lightning and thunder and pouring down rain, and there's park rangers running around going, we have to get everybody off the mountain, and he's up there somewhere. Meanwhile, 4:30 passes, 5:30 passes, 6:30 passes, and now it's 7:30 and starting to get dark, and pouring rain still, and he comes walking down the path with his with no shirt on, his T-shirt around his head like a towel, and a pair of running shorts with his backpack on like nothing's wrong. Just cruising on down the trail, and I am panicked, completely panicked. Where have you been? He's like, I was up on the rock. Like, I said, did you not see the thunder? Just right, just phew, because he was just that way. He was always running or hiking or biking or doing something, but his trust in me and the day that he handed me that car, which is still sitting in the front of his house as we speak, meant a lot to him, and it meant a lot to a lot of us because we had a lot of memories in that car. But I never forgot the trust that he had given me that day, and living up to that trust when I knew that, you know, it was a rare thing to get that, especially at 15. I wasn't exactly behaving too much at that time. But he stayed with me no matter what I did and all the mistakes that I made as a teenager. He never yelled at me. He never told me that what I was doing was wrong. He was always very passive about everything and just said, well, maybe you, I don't know, might want to consider trying it this way. And he knew me well enough to know that I responded quite well to him. And I did pretty much everything that he told me to do, and he was never wrong when it came to things like that. And I am so very grateful to have had him. And I do feel the loss, but every day when I wake up, that's what I think about, is being grateful for the experiences that I was able to have with him and to have such a full life for such a young man. And he was young, and he was even younger in age than he was in actual years, because he was always light and airy and childlike, and that made it so enjoyable to be around him all the time. And I think a lot of people have experienced that with him. I mean, he was just always there for you, and that there was never any exception to that other than time constraints. Beyond his professional accomplishments, you know, he had a heart of gold and not a mean bone in his body. His generosity knew no limits. And I know that he touched countless lives with his selflessness and making a difference in the world and leaving a legacy of kindness that will resonate for generations to come. And I don't look at this as goodbye with him, because when I look around, I see him everywhere. I can't tell you how many times we've been here and have him tell me every last thing there is to know about every single one of these things that you see here. And he came to visit me when I lived in the UK, and we went to go look at P-51 engines and Rolls-Royce restorations, and to be in the UK and to walk into a private hangar to see my uncle's name on the wall for registering those engines and making them, you know, checking them that they were flight worthy, was pretty profound. To be in another country and to have people know who he was across the pond was a big deal. And we went all the way to Normandy and did all the World War II stuff and had an amazing time, except he did complain a little bit about my driving on the Autobahn, but that was common for him. But I just wanted to thank you guys all for being here, because obviously he impacted a lot of us, and I know that we'll never ever forget him, and I'm glad for that. And again, I stand just in grace and being grateful for his beautiful daughters and his beautiful granddaughter, and I see him in them, and I'm so grateful that they're here and that we're here to support them, because there's a lot that we can help them know about their dad and what a great guy he was. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Terry to hear more about Bill's work life.
My name is Terry Stoddard, and I'm not going to cry, I hope. And anyway, I worked with Bill at the FAA, and he was also a very dear friend to me, too. I got to see my son. And I'm just thankful to Rachel. She's put a beautiful, beautiful memorial on, and she's just lovely. And I just am honored and touched that she would have me here today to speak. I wanted to, since I have been away and I haven't been around for a long time, I wanted to get some input from the guys. And so Joanne, all of them, I'll just tell you real quickly some of their favorite things about Bill. Joanne Boda, she loved Bill, and she sat by him forever, really close. And she just remembers they always played all kinds of songs, and they watched all kinds of movies, and then they had to guess at everything in them, because Bill was really good at that. And Joanne loved that. And when Bill died, she wept for days. It was sad, but they're very, very close. Bill Reichert remembers at Chuck and Mary Ann's Airworthiness Bash that Bill's the only person. They had a beautiful backyard, and they opened it up for camping on the weekends every now and then. And Bill's the only one who ever misused the fish pond, and he ran out and jumped right in the middle of it and waited for us to come, and nobody was there. And then Chuck Reynolds remembers when Bill started at the FAA. Oh, and I was Bill's boss for a while, so I had the pleasure of getting him first, I think. And anyway, Chuck remembers that when Bill came to the office, he was very interested in old airplanes, obviously, from the things you guys have been saying. But he just hung on to Chuck and had Chuck teach him everything Chuck knew, and Chuck knows a lot of stuff about old airplanes. And he said that he was very, very proud of Bill when he retired, because he felt like Bill filled in his place. And it's funny because Rod, talking to him, he was saying that he became the office historian. He was the go-to guy. So it was pretty cool, and we all learned a lot from each other. And then Joe, just a quick side note, had noted, I don't know where Joe went, there he is, that we have, a long time ago, I gave Joe a cactus as a present, and I didn't know that it looked extra funny. It had a certain characteristic that I won't go into, but anyway, I had a lot of fun made at me over that cactus, and Joe said that he passed the cactus on to Bill, and Bill has been taking care of the cactus for a long time now, because I've been gone a long time now. And now the proud recipient is Kevin. And Kevin, where did Kevin go? Over there, yeah. So anyway, it's still around, but I don't need to see it. I bet I asked for a picture. And then on me, I have two quick things. One is, and I have a few more after that, is I love the movie It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and Bill loved the movie It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and he told me every single detail of a movie about It's a Mad, Mad World, and I still love that movie, and I can't not see those old airports and stuff and think of everything that Bill knew, and he's amazing. And then my other thing is not a happy thing necessarily, but it's important to me, is on an accident one time, there were a few of us in the car, and we had to go on a mountain. And it was a very, very, very steep mountain, and it was very scary climbing a mountain. And Bill was right there with me the whole time. And it was lovely because he climbed it all with me. And in the end, 3, I call them angels, Army Rangers came down and swooped up our stuff and took us to that place we needed to go. And that just is because, as I'm reminded tonight, even Dennis from NTSB is here, or somewhere too, is everybody took care of everybody, and we were really, really spoiled having such great friends and just great people to work with. It was extremely touching, and in the last part of my life, I ended up away from the FAA early. It's still really, really important to me, and I'm very thankful for it, and thankful that a lot of the guys are here. So on the lighter side, there's 2 more. Scott remembers that Scott and Char got married, and I was at Scott and Char's wedding, and at the end of the wedding, Char threw her bouquet, and Rachel caught it, and you threw the garter belt. And anyway, Bill caught it. And Scott looked at Bill and said, "You're a dead man?" And 6 months later, they were married, and it was wonderful. And I got to go to that one, too. It was wonderful and fun to be there. And anyway, the last 2 quick ones is, last one is Kevin. And Kevin was telling me that Bill can talk quite a lot, and he's, happy to talk and happy to share. And Kevin sits very close to Bill, and Kevin doesn't talk quite as much as Kevin does. So, And so Kevin doesn't talk as much as Bill does. But anyway, Bill said that he has a bell, and now I found out there's one for Joe too, but he has a bell, and every time Bill's on the phone talking to somebody about airplanes or problems with airplanes or whatever it is, and Bill talks too long, then Kevin rings the bell, and he says that Bill's reaction is he says, "Hey, looks like I gotta go. Kevin rang the bell." So I thought that was pretty cute. Okay, and then I'll be real quick. Emily and Grace, hang on. Your dad was so in love with you guys, and for a part of the time, he had you to himself. And this was just before Rachel, because Rachel filled that void, but your house was the funnest house in the world. I had a friend to stop at, and the Crow, I love the Crow, I love the backyard that was crazy to look at, everything. You were working on projects. Your dad just did everything. He loved you guys. He'd go to California and happily work on the cars and come back and you just had a great dad, and he was always in love with you guys and always cared about you. And then and then Rachel came into his life. And pretty much, it just was like a fairy tale starting from there. And I know that Rachel's extremely happy about it, so I'll let her have her say. And we're thankful that you came into his life. So thank everybody for coming to this, and I thank you for listening to me. He was a great guy. We loved him. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. That's really interesting for me to hear all the things about his work life, because it's, a corner we don't all get to see. And I think you transitioned really well, because I think we're going to hear from Grace and Emily next.
Thank you, everyone, today for coming. For those of you who don't know me or who I haven't met, I am Bill's oldest daughter, Grace. And in the end, there were a lot of things that I wish I could have said to my dad. And so I hope it's all right that I share some of those things with you all today. While everyone here, I'm sure, had their own unique relationship with my dad, I hope that some of the things I share resonate with you, as he was almost always his genuine, kind, unapologetically goofy self, regardless of where he was or who he was with. So I'd like to just say to you, Dad, how grateful I am, truly, for how fun you made life, and for how much of a positive influence you had on the person I have become today. You shared with me your appreciation and respect of nature, and I'll never forget when you joined me for a spring break trip to Yosemite when I was down in college. Knowing how much time you had spent visiting me when you were younger, visiting Yosemite when you were younger and all of the fun times that you had shared with me about that place, I knew there was no one else that I'd rather go with than you. And your willingness to hop into a van full of sweaty, hormonal, 20-something college students and drive the 16 and a half hours down to Yosemite and sleep on the cold, hard ground in a tiny tent in the middle of March for 10 days with me meant so much. And despite being the only person over 30 on the trip, everyone had a great time with you, which I had no doubt in my mind that they would. You listened when people spoke and took genuine interest in getting to know everyone that you met, which is a truly rare quality. You were always so humble, never able to acknowledge or accept how impactful you were to me and many others, and you always put others and their needs before your own. I could never repay you for the countless hours you spent driving me across Washington when I went away to undergrad, and even the big move down to Southern California when I was accepted into veterinary school. There's no way I could have gotten to where I am today without your love, support, and quality time that you spent with Em and I growing up. You came with me when I got my first dog, when at 19, I had the great idea of meeting up with a complete stranger in an Albertsons parking lot at 9 p.m., and who was advertising puppies for sale on Craigslist. And while I heard all about your skepticism and your hesitation on the 20-minute drive to our potential doom, the instant we got out of the car, I saw your stern expression, full of concern, melt away, replaced by a warm smile when you saw that little ball of fluff that would grow up to be our Nala. It took roughly 2 seconds before you looked up at me and you asked, "So you're getting her, right?" And of course I did. 10 years later, I still have that not-so-little puppy who loved and adored you just as much as I did. One of my last memories with you was when you surprised me with a visit for my birthday last September down in California. While you were there, I had played an episode of a show that I had watched previously and thought you'd find hilarious. This particular episode, there were these little mini people, like it was like a bird's eye view and sped up, and the little people in the show had like high-pitched voices, which my dad loved, funny voices, and fast motion, sped up things. So I just knew he'd love this episode, and so when I put it on, you were in the middle of trying to hang something on my wall, and you burst out laughing harder than I'd ever seen you laugh in a long time. To see the joy on your face and hear your infectious laugh made me feel assured that I knew you the way I thought I did. And just like how you knew how much a surprise visit from you would mean to me. I'll be graduating from veterinary school next year, and I never thought that you wouldn't be there to see that day. Because you didn't have any brothers or sons, you were technically the last remaining Shin in the family. So, while it may not be important to anyone else but me, I've decided that I will never change my last name because I will always be proud to be your daughter and carry on your legacy. I can only hope that I can be half the human you were, and I'll love and miss you forever. Thank you for the amazing 29 years I was lucky enough to share with you. I love you, Dad. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Hi, everybody. I want to first thank everybody for being here. I see lots of familiar faces, lots of people I haven't seen before, and I know my dad would say that he wouldn't expect all these people to be here. He doesn't think this many people care about him, so it's really nice to see everybody here who cares. Also, just honoring my dad and the amazing human being that he was. Growing up, my dad was always the fun dad who all my friends liked to be around and hang out with. Whenever my friends would come over, we would go out and do something fun. He was always able to provide that positive father figure for people more than just my sister and I. One of the many gifts of my dad is that he was able to build such personal, unique relationships with everyone in his life. His impact on others was so huge, and even people who had only met him briefly felt warmth and kindness from him. My dad has always taught me so many things in my life and has always been my biggest support. He was the one who showed me how to live a positive and fulfilling life through my actions. When my sister and I were little kids, we would often go to this hike in Enumclaw called Mount Peak. And through the countless times we had been on that hike, I developed such a love for nature, and I feel so much at peace when I'm outdoors. Without him having to tell me anything about nature, he showed me through his actions that nature was an important part of his life. Hearing his stories when he was a child and a young adult of his outdoor adventures also brought me so much clarity as to why I feel closest to him when I'm spending time outdoors. My dad's passion for planes and cars was also something I'd always looked up to him for, because he was always so generous with his knowledge and his skills and would help anybody who needed it. His kindness was something that radiated from his soul and has always been so refreshing in a world that may not always be so kind. I have some of the most amazing memories with my dad, and he always knew how to have a good time. One of our last family trips to Kauai, my dad and I swam and played games in the pool until we were all pruned up, and it was just one of my favorite vacations with him, because it was being able to see him let loose and have fun, and it just made me feel so good to be in that environment with him. Another time when it snowed one winter, he wanted to go do donuts out in the snow in the cul-de-sac. And although the neighbors weren't too happy, we had a lot of fun. And it was something that he did often, where he never broke the law, but he would push it just to the limit to have enough fun, to where people would yell at you and then he would stop it, go away. His goofiness and optimism was ever present within himself, even while he was sick, and that's something that I continue to hold on to today. I'm truly heartbroken without my dad, and although he wasn't much of a religious man, I feel his spirit with me every single day. And I feel his personality come out through my daughter, and I'm constantly reminded of him in every airplane that I see. I feel so blessed to have been able to spend 26 years of my life with him, and I'm beyond grateful that my daughter was able to spend the first 7 months of her life with him as well. He truly is an irreplaceable person, such an amazing father, grandfather, brother, uncle, and friend. Since my dad was an organ donor, one of the only viable organs were his eyes, and it brings me so much joy to know that someone will be blessed to be able to view the world as my dad did, through a lens of laughter, kindness, and love. I love and miss you so much, Dad. Rest in paradise. Thank you.
We have one last speaker, but my mom is going to speak last. And I'm going to give her a hug first.
A very dear friend and person in my life said to me when she found out I was going to speak, she said, "Are you sure? It's not very typical for the widow to speak. But those of you that know me know there's not a lot of typical about me." And there was never anything typical about mine and Bill's relationships. We met 18 years ago and were married 13 years. Someone said to me after Bill passed that she couldn't help but think that I'd been cheated out of many years with Bill. I wasn't cheated. I was blessed with every moment we had. There was nothing that we couldn't laugh about, cry about, talk about, or work through, no matter how big. When Bill got sick, I know many of you were very surprised to hear that he had passed, because Bill was always so healthy and so full of life. And on January 29th, Bill woke up and he said he was always first one up and doing things, and he got up and he hadn't been feeling good for a couple days, and then I went downstairs, came back up, and he was sound asleep, and it's like, okay, honey, I'm taking you to the hospital. This is not normal. So that was January 29th. We had no idea the journey that we were embarking on. But together we took it in stride. The first 30 days were so difficult because we couldn't find any answers. It was just full of tests with no results. And those were the days that Bill was really scared. But the last 60 days, they were the hardest of our lives and the hardest of our marriage, but they were the best of our marriage. We grew far beyond what either of us had ever experienced or expected in life. Each day brought us blessings. Some would be huge, like the day Jamez came and said, "I'd like to ask Emily to marry me." And Bill was thrilled. Or the day we realized that all the procedures they'd done got his kidneys working, so there would be no more dialysis. Each day there was a blessing, and some days the blessing was so small, I was telling my friend Bob, Bill would always call it the cafeteria down in the bottom floor of the UW, the bowels of the building. And he'd say, "Rachel, will you go down to the bowels of the building and see if they've got strawberry milk in yet?" And some days there was strawberry milk, and I'd buy it all up and come up, and that was a big thing. But his picture always keeps popping up at me. But when we were hoping to go home, we were able to go home one day, 24 hours. We were home for Easter. It was the best 24 hours. But before we were hoping to go home, the doctor said, now that Bill's kidneys are functioning, he's still on liquid nutrition, the thought of long-term care is back on the table. And I looked at Bill, and Bill said, I don't want to go to long-term care. So I held his hand, and I looked straight into those beautiful eyes, and I said, you know what? You are going to have to put your big boy pants on and start eating, or you're just going to get weaker, and we're not going to get there. And I said, I'm going to Josh and Megan's for dinner. I'll be back this evening. When I got back, Bill was sleeping. And so I just watched him. He was peacefully sleeping. When Bill woke up, he said, I have a story to tell you. I listened quietly. He said things got crazy this afternoon, and he remembered all of the doctors and nurses were working over him. But then the next thing he knew, there was nobody in the hospital. The doors were locked, and he couldn't get out. Now, Bill and I used to watch TV shows together. And there was one of the shows we watched was The Walking Dead. And very early on in the season, the main character wakes up, he's been in a coma, and he's locked in, and there's no doctors, and he can't get out, and there's zombies. And I'm like looking at Bill going, really? And he's like, oh no, there were no zombies. But he said, I woke up, and there was no one there. And he said, the door was locked, and he said, I kept yelling and pleading for help. And after what seemed like hours, a janitor came in. Bill said, oh, thank you so much for coming. Can you please help me out? He said, the janitor was a very kind man, and he said, I really wish I could help you, but I am just here to clean the bathroom. Bill pleaded with him, and the janitor said, sir, I'm doing my job, and I need to go inside and clean the toilet and the mirrors. Bill kept pleading with the janitor, and the janitor told him, sir, I'm going to close the door because I need to clean the inside of it. I suggest you figure out what your job is because I'm doing my job. You need to figure out yours. And when he closed the door, Bill saw the message I'd written on the window. Bill, I love you, and I believe in you. And then he saw the pictures I had posted on the wall. And he said, he told the janitor that he remembered what his purpose was, and he felt like he had been given a second chance. The janitor said, yes, Bill, you have been given a second chance. The next thing Bill remembered, the room was back to normal. The doctors and nurses were working over him. And after he told me this, he said, do you think I'm crazy? And I said, no, Bill, you just had a great conversation with God. And he said, you know what? I did. Next morning, he started eating, and we took slow walks, and life was safe and fear-free again. In the last 72 hours, I had come to acceptance that even though we fought so hard and I was so proud of him, I knew he needed to be able to let go. He waited until he could see or talk to all of our children. Josh and Megan arrived back from Disneyland, and Kellen was so brave. Kellen had his lightsaber, and the lights went off as the droid made noises. Even though Bill was nonverbal, he could still make noises acknowledging his joy. Drew and Grace and Emily came and sat with their dad. On Sunday early evening, our son Dan called and wanted to talk to Bill. I prepared Dan that Bill's breathing had become labored and the nurse was getting him pain meds. I put the speaker up to Bill, and Dan said, "It's okay, Dad. If you need to go, it will be okay. You made me into the man I am today, and Josh, Drew, and myself will take care of Mom and Grace and Emily. We've got this. You just need to rest." Right then, the nurse came into the room, and Bill's breathing went right back to a peaceful slumber-like state. And she said, "I guess he already received what he needed." The next couple hours, I just held his hand, and the warmth came over me, and I just kept whispering, "I love you." And at 7 o'clock, he just ever so peacefully slipped away. There was no pain. It was the hardest moment, but the absolute most beautiful moment. So my message to you from Bill is, life is good. We have no idea how much time we have. Dang it, I thought I had a lot more time. Live each day with integrity and compassion. Each day, acknowledge the blessings you experience. Be kind and take time to listen. Thank you all for coming. I am so proud of my adult sons and my daughters. They are walking this journey with grace and dignity. Bill will always be with us. He will be with all of us, celebrating our lives. We just need to always keep our hearts and our minds open. Thank you.
If I could make days last forever, if words could make wishes come true. See, I ruined it now. I'd save every day till eternity. But there never seems to be enough time to do the things you want to do once you find them. I looked around enough to know you're the one I want to go through time with. If I had a box just for wishes and dreams that had never come true, the box would be empty except for the memories of how they were answered by you. But there never seems to be enough time to do the things you want to do once you find